Well, there are many people around the world with unique hobbies, such as collecting, just like our next guest. He is from Washington, D.C., and he enjoys collecting original photos and documents of Indonesian historical moments.
Now, interestingly, he's willing to spend a lot of money just to collect historical and rare photos. So what prompted him to do what he's doing right now, and how extensive is his collection, and how much money has he invested to obtaining them?
That's right. So to find out some of the answers to our questions, we are now joined by rare photo and document collector Jacob Cass. He's joining us now from Washington, D.C. Hi, good evening, Jacob. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Jacob.
Happy New Year.
How are we doing? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
New
you,
Year.
too. Yeah. So,
Happy New Year.
start us off perhaps by telling us what got you interested in Indonesian history and collecting rare photos in these collections.
Well, my wife is from Indonesia.
Okay.
She's from Jakarta. And I've been there a few times with her. Once before we were married, we went with friends. And then we went a few times, afterwards. And over time, I just started to fall in love with the place, the culture, everything about it. And when I come back here, you don't really have the same, connection to anything anymore. So I started learning the history. I started learning this and that. And I realized that some of this stuff was available to buy, as places have sold off documents over time. And I just started to buy. People told me that some of it was never published over there. I thought it was fairly important, so I just kept buying.
Wow. Okay.
Well, it's good to know that turns out you do have a very important connection to Indonesia. And, we always love people who archive our history, because there's always a limited archive here as well. So, and aside from historical photos, is it true that you also collect old books and magazines and a lot of more memorabilia, historical items? Yeah.
Yeah, so I try to get my hands on whatever I think is interesting or rare, hard to find, especially if it wasn't widely available in Indonesia. I don't buy from Indonesia. I don't want to take the history away from there, whether it's photos, documents, magazines, anything.
Right.
So I search all across America and Europe. So I come across stuff like the famous Time magazine, 1946.
Wow.
With the kind on the front, stuff like that. Different things from the foreign ministry, whether it's pamphlets about Pancasila or anything like that, is the kind of stuff I try to get. Speeches that were published, things like that. Or if something from Indonesia has shown up in America and Europe, I'll get it. Like I said, I just don't buy from over there.
Okay.
So documents, I do have some stamps. That's not really my forte, but they were offered, so I just decided to roll with it. But yeah, documents, magazines, a lot of old stock certificates for old colonial area companies. Like
Oh,
this is
Wow.
this is from 1896, the Kina Fabrik, the quinine factory in Bandung. Really famous place, but that's one of the original stock certificates. So stuff like that I think is, important.
Okay, so some of these documents that you're showing us are well over a century in age. What are some of the things that you have to do to maintain their kind of form, so they're not damaged by, just natural elements like sun and weather?
So I keep everything locked away. Everything is individually put in plastic. I keep it out of sunlight. I put it into folders and binders with anti-humidity tablets, because humidity is the enemy of paper everywhere. So it's kept in a dark place near an air conditioning vent, and with the humidity low.
Okay.
And I'm lucky because a lot of this stuff was kept with, more professional agencies before, so the condition is still incredible.
Oh.
Okay, that was actually going to be my follow-up question, because some of these things are so rare and things do age over time.
Yeah.
When you discover these things, are they in various conditions? I mean, not everything must be in great condition. And how do you what do you do from that point on? Do you try to restore some of it before you kind of add it to your collection?
So I never try to restore anything.
Okay.
Whatever condition it, I keep it because I want it to be original and authentic as much as I can. Most of the stuff before I buy, I kind of check out condition. So if something is folded or something, it doesn't bother me. If something is really missing a lot or faded to the point you can't see it, I just kind of lose interest in it, just because, the documentation and the quality of it are definitely important aspects to it, especially for the kind of cost that you're paying for documents and stuff like this, photos especially. You don't want to buy something that just looks like it came out the bottom of a lake.
Right,
Yeah,
out of the laundry machine.
Yeah, but it's amazing. I was just, we were just, behind the scenes, we were just asking, you had some performance photos and you just, revealed some of that in the video. And I'm just so curious, how extensive is your historical collection? And what is some of your favorite items if you want to show us some of the items that you have, or pictures? I mean, they say pictures are worth more than 1,000 words.
Yeah, so when it comes to 1,000, as you said, 1,000 words, I have just somewhere over 1,000 photos. I stopped counting just because there's no reason to at that point. So more than 1,000 photos. I've got probably at least 100 plus of the stock certificates from the colonial period. I've got probably 50 different books and pamphlets about the country throughout history. I've got the stamps. It's just, it grows and grows. I've got 8 or 9 signatures and autographs from whether it's Adam Malik or President Suharto, just all kinds of stuff like that. It's just, it's taking up more and more space, even though it's just paper.
That's when you know you've got an extensive collection.
But this was going to be my follow-up question, because this is going to be a very interesting museum that you could create, actually. It's like an international perspective in Indonesia, because you purposely try to find items that are not in Indonesia, and it is taken by, international magazines or owned by international people outside of Indonesia. So I'm always just curious about your collection, because I want to see what internationally Indonesia looks like, or how people view us even from centuries back. Do you plan on making a museum?
Honestly, I would love to, but it's one of those things my biggest fear, because I respect Indonesia, is breaking some kind of a law, trying to do something. I don't have a key pass, I don't have a tax ID, I don't have anything like that, and I don't, until I would have everything set, I don't want to cause any problems. That's one of my biggest fears, is doing something that, I lose visa on arrival privileges, or I do something that gets me in the bad graces of immigration.
Well, it's certainly something can be perhaps considered, to work with the government, in order to have some sort of display or exhibition. This would be something that would be amazing.
Display or exhibition.
Yeah, to show not only Indonesians, but those outside of the country in regards to our history and our culture as well. Now, let's talk a little bit let's get down to brass tacks. You mentioned a little bit, some of these things can be costly. What are we talking about? Like, what range of prices have you encountered when you're trying to acquire a particular document or a photo?
So you've got, let's say, your standard photo coming from a press agency, or a media agency. You're running usually around $25 to $60 for a regular photo. Okay. Sometimes you can find it cheaper depending on who's selling it, who's wholesale, if it's just a generic photo. But when you start getting into more famous people, more the more rare that was never sent to many press agencies at all, maybe just one, maybe two, if it's a magazine that 1 or 2 were ever printed, you start getting up to $100. I've got a photo of Major Bundar in 1949, the Round Table Conference. I had it appraised by people at Barnaby's, and they said it was like $300 at least at auction. So photos can get really pricey for important moments.
Right. By the way, do negatives exist for these photos? I say negatives for the kids out there. We used to have to actually print our photos.
I know what negatives are.
Do the negatives exist? And if not, does that make these photos in particular that much more rare because you can't reprint them or recreate them?
So my understanding is that if there are negatives, they would be owned by the original press companies. And a lot of those are bankrupt. Right. And who knows about acquisitions and everything else? Acme News Service is gone. So when they would send out that original newsprint to another agency or wire it to somebody else, you know, those were the only original copies ever made. They were never for sale publicly.
Right.
And if the negative is gone, I know that a lot of the stuff in the, let's say, late 90s, before they really phased out the actual physical copies of photos, they weren't even worried about negatives anymore because, you know, they were digitizing everything.
Right.
So if stuff has been digitized over the years, there's a high chance that they have tossed the negative or didn't keep it in the first place because they kept their photos in a reference library.
Right.
Wow.
There you go. So.
So I mean, it's very interesting because you did said that you, you know, you inquired, you know, a lot of different auction companies regarding to original or authenticity, right? Is there a license or a certificate that you have to obtain or that you can obtain to, you know, to make sure these are like original photos of moments?
So it depends on where you're buying it from. You know, there's some companies that will give you their own certificate of authenticity. You know, they'll give you their own guarantee on it. When it comes to stuff from media archives, a lot of it is seeing the actual documentation of the photo. So if we look at let's look at a famous photo like this, Sukarno Suharto 66, right?
Wow.
Yep. Wow.
So if you look at the back, you see it's from the Pan Asia group with their documentation. It's dated because it was sent to Sweden. So you get the 66 on there.
Okay.
So there's documentation on the photo that comes from the agencies that kind of assures that what you're getting is the real deal.
Wow.
Is that sometimes a problem, Jacob? I mean, are there kind of like fakes out there? Because obviously, people can do amazing things with reproducing or recreating something and trying to make it look vintage. Have you ever encountered anything like that?
I mean, yeah, I've been burned a few times. I've been burned a few times where you get something and it comes in and, you know, back then the paper was a little bit different.
Yeah.
Most places were doing high gloss, and if not, then it was a matte, but it was done with wire printing.
Okay.
So you get used to seeing them and you can tell kind of what's real or fake. But when you buy from a new buyer and they send you something that's just like printed on regular paper with a printed out stamp, you know, you're just like, oh, come on, you know. But that's part of the territory.
Yeah.
I've also run into a couple times where, because a lot of what I'm doing is searching through wholesalers that have got access to the archives for, let's say, the Houston Post or a different newspaper or magazine, and they're liquidating their stock, you know, because it's out of business because of the digital age. So a lot of that is tracking down the wholesaler who has that and latching onto them.
Okay.
Wow, that's a
I hope I
lot
didn't
of
just lose my
effort.
train of thought.
That's a lot of amazing effort.
So,
you know?
real quick, Jacob, I'm curious, and we're curious actually. Is there one on a bucket list somewhere where you really want this particular document or photo you haven't gotten your hands, but you know it's out there somewhere?
Oh, that's really tough just because I know that there's stuff in Indonesia that I could buy,
Right.
but I won't. So I'm incredibly reliant on what's been taken out of the country or what was taken by the foreign press. I would love to get more photos of heroes from like the independence wars.
Right.
I would also love to get more photos of Bung Hatta. I'm a big fan of Hatta, just, you know, his demeanor, his honesty. And it's hard to find stuff of him abroad that's not mass-produced books and stuff. So
Right.
I would love to find stuff like that, but if I can't, I'm honestly happy with what I have and the direction I've been going.
You know what, Jacob? I know that you're in DC. I know you must have some kind of connection to the embassy there. And I'm very sure that we'd be so excited to collaborate with you for some kind of historical exhibition. Because it doesn't have to be a museum, but it can be an exhibit because what you're doing, I think, is very amazing. There are a lot of, for me, it's a moment of pride to know that non-Indonesians are also so eager about our history that honestly, not a lot of us know a lot about.
Well said.
Yes.
Thank you, Jacob,
So,
for your time.
Jacob, thank you so much for your time and your effort as well. I would love to
very
see your
much.
exhibition someday.
Let's hope it happens soon.
If it's there, I'll hit you up.
Yes,
Thank you very
for
much.
sure.
Appreciate you.
Take care. Have yourself a great week.
Have a wonderful day.
I was
Stay safe.
Jacob Cass joining us all the way from Washington.
Washington,
Hey.
DC.